Okay, so it's very rare that I come onto my YouTube channel and make a video about one specific book. However, I gotta make an exception here because I almost feel like a moral obligation to film this video because I've spent a fair amount of time, a considerable amount of time, making fun of badly written celebrity memoirs and poetry collections, bad celebrity books. Recently, I read the best celebrity memoir I've ever read. One of the best memoirs I've ever read. It's very, very rare that I really enjoy a memoir, let alone give it 5 stars, and that happened with this one. So this is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jennette McCurdy. Firstly, cracking title. What a genius title for this book. Like, that's pretty much what made me initially interested in reading this. So I feel like you come for the title and then you stay for the incredible writing. One thing you have to be careful of here is that, like, whenever I get parcels and I'm away, I always say to my mum, like, oh, could you open them and let me know what's inside? This one I was pretty careful with because I just thought, if my mum opens this and sees a book with no context called I'm Glad My Mum Died, she's gonna get a bit nervous. So I kind of had to give her the heads up on this one, that this was on its way. So let's talk about this book because it is incredible. I read it all in one day. Like, this is the kind of book where once you start reading it, you probably just won't stop until you get to the final page. And I've heard that from multiple people too. Like, when they picked this up, they were then like, well, I need to cancel all the rest of my plans for today because this is what I'm doing now. Like I said, it's a memoir, it's non-fiction, but it has great pacing. It's really well laid out and crafted. It's funny, but it's also heartbreaking, and I want to talk about it. So, hello. I'm gonna read you the blurb because I always get nervous that I'm gonna give you spoilers on like what the content of the book is. Jennette McCurdy was 6 years old when she had her first acting audition. Her mother's dream was for her only daughter to become a star, and Jennette would do anything to make her mother happy. So she went along with what mum called calorie restriction, eating little and weighing herself 5 times a day. She endured extensive at-home makeovers while mum chided, "Your eyebrows are invisible, okay? You think Dakota Fanning doesn't tint hers?" She was even showered by mum until age 16 and was also forced to share her diaries, email, and her entire income. There's also a scene where her mum, like, essentially comes over one night to her apartment and then just moves in. In I'm Glad My Mum Died, Jennette recounts all of this in unflinching detail, just as she chronicles what happened when the dream finally comes true. Cast in a new Nickelodeon series called iCarly, she is thrust into fame. Though mum is ecstatic, emailing fan club moderators and getting on a first-name basis with the paparazzi. Do you see the red flags? Our red flagging here? Jennette is riddled with anxiety, shame, and self-loathing, which manifest into eating disorders, addiction, and a series of unhealthy relationships. These issues only get worse when soon after taking the lead in the iCarly spin-off Sam and Cat alongside Ariana Grande, her mother dies of cancer. Finally, after discovering therapy and quitting acting, Jennette embarks on recovery and decides for the first time in her life what she really wants. I'm Glad My Mum Died is an inspiring story of resilience, independence, and the joy of shampooing your own hair. Oh my god. I think, unfortunately, what the media is picking up on most is the kind of tea, and there is tea, and I did actually appreciate the honesty in here. She talks about her friendship with Miranda Cosgrove, which is lovely, and also her working relationship with Ariana Grande on Sam and Cat. And you know, I feel like a lot of the time, memoirs and autobiographies are so guarded. There's a certain element of where someone in the public eye is trying to maintain their reputation as like a nice person, and so they really worry about being rude or mean or unkind. Whereas in I'm Glad My Mum Died, it is such a raw and fair and human response to what she was experiencing. Like, she really is just so honest, brutally honest, in a way that I think is actually way more respectable. And so she talks about how Ariana Grande got preferential treatment, but she doesn't say Ariana Grande was horrible, she's lazy, she's an unkind person. Instead, she talks about how it made her feel. She's like, yeah, I did feel a bit bitter and I did feel a bit jealous that I was having to do double the work and I was having to kind of man the ship while Ariana Grande was off being a superstar. But she talks about how they were treated differently and how that made her feel, how the opportunities that Ariana Grande was getting made her feel. It's not about saying, this person is horrible, this person is awful and evil. She doesn't say that. She's very respectful, I think. She talks about her response and how it made her feel. And I think that's fair. I think that's actually much better and more insightful. It also covers Dan Schneider's treatment of the child stars on Nickelodeon, but very cleverly, she never mentions him by name. She refers to him as like the creator, which I think is really genius and also leads me on to talking about the writing style. So this is written obviously throughout her life. So we follow her like as a young child, but then also as an adult woman. And the writing style kind of changes and reflects that kind of maturity increasingly throughout the book. So when she's a child, it's written in a very kind of naive way. She really depicts exactly how she felt at that specific age. And so you can see the personal growth and development just through the way that she writes it, in terms of how her mindset was changing and evolving and growing, and eventually after her mum dies, how she starts to recalibrate and renegotiate her relationship with a lot of very normal and basic human functions and behaviours and experiences, because everything she'd experienced up until that point and also kind of afterwards was refracted through her mother, through her mother's kind of lens, because she was so overbearing and overprotective and intense. And I've seen interviews with Jeanette McCurdy where she talks about how she doesn't hate her mother, she understands her as a very complicated and nuanced person, and I think that that really shines through in this book. Like, it's so well-rounded and well thought out and considered. She doesn't just depict her mum as this one-dimensional kind of villainous figure. She talks about the way that her mother behaved and the implications and the impacts that had on her, but she also recognises that her mum was troubled in her own way too. And yeah, like I said, she's a complicated and nuanced person. So the writing style is great. It is so concise and to the point, but also very, very readable. And it feels very self-aware. She's not on the defense here trying to paint herself out to be a saint. It's not like a hero and villain story. She also acknowledges when she makes mistakes and when things that have impacted her in her life cause her to act in a certain way. One thing I loved was the discussion of friendships, especially adult friendships, and how often those friendships are contextual. So they'll be like someone that you worked with, or someone that you had an opportunity with, someone that you were dating at a certain time in your life. And she talks about how people do kind of move in and out of your life, and how sometimes friendships do fluctuate or oscillate, which I thought was really interesting to read as like a person in your 20s. Obviously the media, when they write stories about this book, are going to go for these big eye-catching headlines where they talk about the drama surrounding it. And there is tea. I felt like it's great that this actually has, you actually do learn some kind of drama from this book, but it's not the primary focus. She also talks about how Nickelodeon tried to give her kind of hush money, not to talk about certain controversies that happened there at their institution. And I'm just manifesting for Jeanette McCurdy that she makes so much money from this book. She deserves it. The one thing I will say, that I've seen a few people say online, is that there are certain gaps in this narrative. So like, for example, when she first gets her job at iCarly, we skip forward a few years. There's certain time jumps, but I think that's because this is a memoir, not an autobiography. And the difference there is that an autobiography is kind of like a story of someone's life, whereas a memoir will take a specific theme or a specific idea and run with that and focus on that. And the theme of this book is her relationship with her mother and her the implications and the impacts that had on her life and her career. And so I do think, because this is a memoir, it kind of does make sense that there are some time jumps rather than her just kind of laying out, this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. We follow a theme, which is kind of her troubled relationship with her mother, and then how that impacted her mental health and her relationship with eating and food and the world of fame and celebrity. So it does jump around in time a little bit, but that's because we're following a theme, not a life. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, that is I'm Glad My Mum Died by Jeanette McCurdy, and I'm glad I read this book because it's so brilliant. If you're my age and you kind of grew up with these child stars on like Nickelodeon and Disney Channel, this is so insightful and I think you'll really enjoy it. But you also don't need to have followed Jeanette McCurdy's career or to know that much about her in order to appreciate this book and take a lot from it, I think, because it's really bloody good. It's described on the cover as an important cultural document, and I think that's really true, because we're kind of in this era now of looking at the way that child stars have been treated over time by institutions and by their own families. So I think this is a really important addition to that kind of dialogue and that conversation. So yeah, this was great. I had to make a whole video on it just to tell you how good it is. I actually listened to this as an audiobook because it only just came out in the UK. It came out on the 15th of September, and I pre-ordered the physical copy, which I have not done for years, because I was like, I need to have a physical copy of this so I can tell you about it, but also so I can keep, I don't want to go through and like underline my favourite passages. But yeah, I did listen to this as an audiobook because that's actually how I prefer to listen to memoirs or to experience memoirs, in audiobook form when the person themselves narrates it, because Jeanette McCurdy narrates it in such a brilliant way. It's so captivating. Obviously her background as an actress definitely helps, the way that she kind of presents the story, but hearing the crack in her voice and hearing her tell the story herself was just so moving and powerful, and yeah, that's how I consumed this. But I think I'm going to also read the physical version too because I loved it so much. So that is I'm Glad My Mum Died. This is me paying reparations for all the times I've slated celebrity books because this is superb. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I'll catch you next time. Bye bye!